Anne-Marie Jordan, who is our last keynote speaker. So she's a research scholar at the Center of Humanities in Lisbon and Zurich. Her specializations include Kunstkammers and menageries in Austria, the Netherlands, Portugal, and Spain, with research focusing on the courts and patronage of Habsburg women, and the global and artistic transfers between Africa, Asia, Brazil, and Renaissance courts in Iberia and Austria. She has made a lot of exhibitions, and maybe the most award-winning book that we all know, it's The Global City on the Streets of Renaissance Lisbon, curated with Jane Lowe. She is also the author of Retrato de Corte em Portugal, O Legado de António Moro, and The Story of Suleiman, Celebrity Elephants, and Other Exotica in Renaissance Portugal, and a recent biography by Catarina d'Áustria, Rainha Colecionadora. I have to say that I have also once heard a marvelous conference by Anne-Marie Jordan, where she would explain how these members of the Portuguese royal family would offer exotic animals to all their cousins in Central Europe. And so, in fact, the Portuguese are the responsible for the reintroduction of these animals in Europe. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for accepting our invitation. So
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. Is it working?
Yes, but full screen now, please. Okay, perfect.
Wonderful. I'm so happy when these technical things work out so well. First of all, I won't scare you. I won't speak for 45 minutes. I purposely made my paper shorter, knowing that I'm the last one at the end of the day, which is a cruel decision for me, but I made it short, and I'll make it quick so everybody can have their cocktails afterwards. I would like to thank Ana Rodrigues and Henrique Leitão for their invitation to speak today at this fascinating conference on art and science. I think the idea to bring historians of science and art together at this platform, even if it's virtual today, is an outstanding one. And I hope that this conference is the beginning of many more future and fruitful exchanges between historians of science and art historians. I've never met or knew Helena Avelar, but I feel she's with us today, and I'm most honored to be giving this paper on a topic which I think she would like very much. I am speaking today about a celebrity rhinoceros who became a pop star in the late 16th century Lisbon and Madrid. Oops. Yes, okay, sorry, I'm just trying to orient myself. In September of 1577, an Indian female one-horned rhinoceros disembarked with her Indian mahout in Lisbon. Quite a journey for a land animal that can run up to 34 miles an hour. The unhappy beast was sent from Goa as a gift from the Portuguese governor of India, Diogo de Menezes, to Sebastian, the king of Portugal. For the captain of the ship, it was a logistic nightmare and a challenge to transport her. And he was relieved when he docked in Lisbon. To her credit, she became a celebrity the instant she touched land. 2 years later, the Florentine merchant and agent Filippo Sassetti, based in Lisbon, nicknamed her the Marvel of Lisbon in a letter he sent to a colleague in Florence. The Portuguese, however, preferred to call her Bada or Abada, which derives from the old Malay word bado. In Portuguese, in modern Portuguese today, Abada refers to a female rhinoceros. A fierce competition broke out over Abada after she arrived, with several European rulers seeking to acquire her for their royal menageries. The Spanish ambassador, Juan de Silva, hoped she would be officially presented by the Lisbon court to King Philip II for his menagerie located at his palace at Aranjuez. while the imperial ambassador in Spain, whom I show here, Hans Khevenhuller, was desperate to obtain Abada so that she could be sent to his patron, Emperor Rudolf II in Prague. Much of Khevenhuller's correspondence has survived in Vienna, and it is from his letters that we are able to learn so much about the celebrity pachyderm Abada and her story. Abada was not the second, but perhaps the third Asian rhinoceros after Manuel's I, famous Gonda, to reach Lisbon in the 16th century. About the second rhinoceros, I will not delve into this now, but in my published text. As Neil MacGregor once aptly said, Durer's rhinoceros stands as a monument to our endless curiosity about the world beyond our grasp. And I believe Lisbon's citizens and the king, Sebastian of Portugal, felt the same when Abada arrived at Lisbon's docks on the Tagus waterfront in 1577. In any case, the arrival of Abada, who became quite the superstar as Gonda was in 1515, says much about the Portuguese as pioneers in the transmission of culture, material culture, and exotic animals across global oceans in the 16th century. The sensation Abada created prompted local artists to immediately make sketches and watercolors of her. And I show you two of them here. The one to your left is a watercolor, and I apologize, not a very good image, is attributed to Pedro Andrade Caminha, executed shortly after Abada arrived. It is not very good, nor accurate, the painter exaggerating Abada's oversized floppy ears. But the portrayal of the dark-skinned turban Mahout holding an akusha provides an exotic flair to the scene. To your right is a watercolor painted by an anonymous painter in Madrid after Abada moved there in 1583, and where her horn had been cut, about which transfer to Spain I will return to shortly. Albert Durer's popular 1550 engraving of Gonda, which we've just seen, was the best business deal of his life. He sold 4,000 to 5,000 copies of his Gonda print, which brought him a tidy sum of money. Artists in Lisbon and later in Madrid would take up Durer's lead, sketching, painting, and marketing Abada, and selling their artworks and quick portrayals of her they made on the spot to whomever was willing to pay their price. Abada proved to be street art at its best, and this already in the late 16th century. Representations of her were made on a commercial level, which images agents and ambassadors bought up quickly to distribute them to courts across Europe, to rulers and princely collectors. The anonymous painter who made the two images of Abada to your left can be compared to a 16th century Andy Warhol, opting to depict her as a series of multiples, and for the convenience of lucrative sales and prospective buyers, the artist could then easily cut each image, thus saving time and energy. The other on your right is a more polished watercolor commissioned from a painter probably when Abada had arrived in Lisbon in 1577. This image was sent by the imperial ambassador Hans Khevenhuller to Emperor Rudolf II. In this depiction, Abada has been placed within an idealized landscape with which the viewer can better appreciate her in a sort of made-up habitat, as well as comprehend her size and scale. Rudolf appreciated this image so much that he had it pasted into a book, which contained a series of animal and plant drawings, all of them watercolors, today in Vienna at the Austrian National Library, better known as the Bestiaire, and which is a very early natural history compendium. The Spanish ambassador in Lisbon at this date, Juan de Silva, was busy shopping along Lisbon streets, buying up all images he could find of Abada. He sent at least one drawing of her to the Spanish court of Madrid, and he also commissioned drawings of her for Benito Arias Montano, librarian of the Escorial Library. Two drawings of the Abada, retratado al natural, that is, painted from life, counted among the precious items given by Philip II to the Escorial Monastery in 1593. These are now lost. King Sebastian and Abada hit it off immediately. The The young king was enchanted with her, having never seen a real rhinoceros up close before, and he was delighted in showing her off to courtiers and Lisbon citizens. It is said that he even ordered a painting of her, but we are left in the dark as to whom this artist may have been, or if this commission was even carried out. It has not survived. However, Abada's arrival in September 1577 was not auspicious for her. The timing was all wrong, as Sebastian was busy preparing for war in Morocco, and he soon had little time to spare for his strange exotic pachyderm. Before embarking for North Africa in late July 1578, Sebastian had promised Abada to Pope Gregory XIII for his menagerie at the Belvedere residence. But with the African campaign looming on the horizon, Abada's trip to Rome was canceled. One important question regarding Abada was a logistical one. Where was she stabled? There is no question that she was first housed in the King's Royal Stables located at the Estaros Palace at Rocio Square. At one point in its history in the mid-16th century, it is known that 100 horses were stabled here, as were the royal elephants the Lisbon court received as gifts and tribute from Ceylon and Goa over the years during the reign of King Juan III, and later the regency of his wife Catalina of Austria. I show you in these two slides the Estaros Palace and its location in Renaissance Lisbon. This now lost residence is thought to have once had large gardens and green pastures for horses, elephants, even Abada. But serious problems arose with Abada. The pachyderm literally hated donkeys, horses, mules, and other animals, and would seriously attack them. Therefore, keeping her at the Estaros stables proved to be impossible, and it was at this juncture that it was decided to move her to the Lisbon waterfront, the Terreiro do Passo, or Palace Square, in front of the Lisbon Royal Palace, the Passo da Ribeira. And I show here the famous detail and miniature of this royal residence and square illuminated by Antonio de Holanda to give an idea of the expanse of this enormous space today occupied by the Praça do Comércio. Abada was then parked in the heart of Renaissance Lisbon, put on public display for all to see. When the German physician Hieronymus Gundlach visited Lisbon years later in 1598, he made a drawing of Lisbon based on the slightly earlier Brown and Hogenberg engraving of Lisbon's panoramic bird eye view printed in 1596. However, Gundlach added a curious detail to his drawing. In the center of the Terreiro do Passo, we see a square construction, which I propose is not a fountain, but rather Abada's open air pen with 4 wooden turrets positioned at each corner, a sort of souvenir which Gundlach thought important enough to insert here and reference, even though Abada had long left Lisbon by this date. It is a curious image, which I need to study more in depth, but Gundlach pasted this drawing into his manuscript today at the Austrian National Library in Vienna. As some of you know, Abada became an instant star, and her pen at the Terreiro do Passo became the tourist attraction of Lisbon after the dragon trees at the Graça convent. People flocked to see her. One important visitor was the imperial ambassador Georg Montfort, who arrived in Lisbon in 1580 on a diplomatic mission. Thankfully, Montfort's expense accounts have survived in Vienna. We know from these that he went straight to Abada's pen at the Tagus waterfront to look at the pachyderm, and then tipped the Indian mahout 4 florins. Lisbon citizens and tourists also marveled at the sight of Abada on a daily basis, as we know from the eyewitness accounts of the Venetian ambassadors Tron and Lippomano, who too watched her take daily baths, which I showed, made a little rhinoceros taking a bath in the Tagus River, as she plunged and waded in the water with joy. Reports and accounts about Abada were written, circulated, and from these avises and letters, as I have just mentioned, we know that Filippo Sassetti dubbed her the marvel of Lisbon. But Abada did not remain Lisbon's only Asian superstar for long. 5 years after Abada had arrived, the governor of India, Ferron Teles de Menezes, sent a pair of young elephants, male and female, from Goa to Lisbon. Only the young elephant bull, aged 3 or 4, survived the journey, arriving in Lisbon on the 5th of August, 1582. This nameless bull, portrayed in the image to your left, was painted in Madrid, where he had been taken with Abada in 1583. In 1582, the imperial ambassador Hans Kevenhiller accompanied the Empress Maria of Austria to Lisbon, both of whom I show here in these two slides. And during their longer stay in Lisbon, they took the opportunity to see Abada more than once. Kevenhiller wrote to Empress Maria's son, Rudolf II, relating to the emperor that the rhinoceros was very fierce, trampling animals and people she did not like, and had even killed a man just the other day in front of the royal palace, the Paço da Ribeira. As a result, Abada's horn was shortened at this juncture to prevent her from harming more people. But it is known that perhaps her ferocity was due to the fact that she arrived from Goa with one blind eye. When King Philip II of Spain conquered and annexed Portugal in 1580, he took possession of both the rhinoceros as well as the 1582 elephant bull. Philip lived for 3 years in Portugal, and while residing in the Lisbon Royal Palace, took immense pleasure in observing Abada on a daily basis. At the end of February 1583, when Philip II made definitive plans to return to Madrid and leave the rule of Portugal to his nephew, Archduke Albert of Austria, Philip ordered the warden of his country palace, the Casa del Campo, Agustin Profit, to travel to Lisbon. Profit, whom we see here in the middle, was commanded by the king to oversee the transportation and travel of Abada and the 1582 elephant by foot to Madrid. A royal order which Profit accomplished with great care. He's paid special attention to the elephant Abada, making sure that they were not harmed during their journey. It is even documented that along the way, if it rained or other inclement weather occurred, the animals were covered and protected. Abada, I think, was most likely transported in some form of vehicle or cart because she was so untamable. When Profit reached Madrid, both pachyderms were housed in a makeshift stable close to the royal palace, the Alcázar, which I show you here in a contemporary drawing. The exact location of this first stable is not known, but what I call provisional stables were most likely located in the area I've marked with the yellow arrow. However, in a short time, these stables proved to be inadequate and far too small, and the elephant bull is recorded to have literally damaged his house with serious repairs needed to fix things up. Obviously, too big of a creature in too small of a space. Philip II then decided, with Agustin Profit still in charge of these pachyderms, to park the rhino and bull at two different local hospitals in Madrid, where a half real was charged for people to come and stare at them. These proceeds were then donated by the king to these two medical institutions. However, Philip's makeshift late 16th century circus was only a temporary solution, while more adequate stables were planned and built by the king with his architects. Philip II chose an ideal spot for his pachyderms not far from the Alcázar Palace, in a valley below his royal residence, bordering the Manzanares River. We see here two contemporary drawings which show the layout of the king's country palace, which was known as the Casa del Campo. The complex of service buildings attached to the principal building, in which I have marked with an arrow and box, show the location where Abada and the elephant bull would live for the remainder of their lives. They moved there officially in 1584, I show you here another image, a beautiful painting which depicts the Casa del Campo with all its rural settings, its gardens, its parterres, and elegant fountains. And to your left is an arrow marking the area where the service buildings began and in which complex Abada and the elephant bull lived. When not in residence, the king allowed visitors to access the Casa del Campo's gardens and also to visit and look at the pachyderms. Foreign tourists, honored guests, and dignitaries were granted special access to see these now famous animals. Artists flocked to admire the curious creatures and make images of them in the vein of Albert Durer. The cameo to your left was executed by the renowned Milanese jeweler and lapidary Jacopo da Trezzo. who worked for Philip II and who too was a great friend of the imperial ambassador Hans Khevenhuller, whom we have seen in a previous slide. The ambassador must have been the person who commissioned this gem, possibly for himself, as well as ordering a copy for his patron, Rudolf II. The watercolor to your left, was executed by an anonymous painter in Madrid, who made this particular image on the spot at Abada's stable at Casa del Campo, where this artist could observe Abada live and up close. The painter sold this watercolor to an Austrian imperial courtier visiting Madrid in 1584, who then pasted it afterwards in his travel diary, which still exists today in Innsbruck. This man, by the name of Adam Hochreiter, had hoped to buy or get a Abada for his patron, Archduke Ferdinand II of Tyrol, who wanted Abada for his menagerie, located at his residence, Schloss Ambras in Innsbruck. The nameless elephant bull died in 1591, as we know from the travelogue written by the German student Diego Quelbis, who visited Spain and Portugal in 1591. When Quelbis took time out of a busy itinerary, to visit Casa del Campo and admire Abada. From Quelbis, we learn that the elephant managed to live to be 7 or 8 years old and probably had perished from bad care and malnutrition, which was often the case with other Asian elephants who had preceded him from Goa to the Lisbon court in the course of the 16th century. We have no information as to the fate of Abada's Indian mahout, who moved to Madrid with Abada in 1583, but we must presume that he continued to take care of her until she died, probably in 1599 or 1600. I show here a curious slide of Abada in what I call her afterlife at the Spanish court. As many of you know far better than I do, rhinoceros body parts, horns, bits of skin were regarded by Khevenhuller and his contemporaries as exotic materia medica. Rhinoceros horns were attributed with magical powers and medicinal properties which could protect owners who owned these pieces of rhinoceros or horns from poison, melancholy, and other maladies. We are looking at a rare watercolor commissioned by Hans Khevenhuller by an unknown painter in Madrid, which he sent to Rudolf II in Prague, and which was later pasted into Rudolf's natural history book, the Bestiaire, that I mentioned earlier in my paper, and which is in Vienna today. Since Khevenhuller never managed to get the live Abada to Prague, after her death, he went to tremendous efforts to get for Rudolf II as many of her body parts as possible. In 1603, Khevenhuller sent to Prague Abada's skin, the last horn, which you see to your left here, that she had in Lisbon before it was cut in 1582, and some of her bones, 130 pieces to be exact. We know from Khevenhuller's letters to Rudolf that he sent him also the 2 tusks of the dead elephant bull and one of his teeth. As it has never been suggested before, I propose that this watercolor we are looking at served as an aide-memoire for the emperor before Abada's horn and body parts reached him. I'm not sure if the molar in the middle of this watercolor is from Abada or the dead elephant. Perhaps one of you here may know and can help me identify what appears to be an upside-down tooth. The turned rhinoceros cup with gilded mounts we see in the middle ground must have been carved either in Lisbon or Madrid, which Khevenhuller purchased in addition to the Abada souvenirs, and which he then forwarded to Prague. From Rudolf II's surviving Kunstkammer inventory, redacted in 1607, we know that the emperor cherished Abada's horn and whatever else of her that had survived, which Khevenhuller had sent from Spain, and that rhinoceros horns in all forms and fashion, body parts, skins, even images of Asian rhinoceros held a pole position in his vast collection at the Estaros Palace in Prague. After Rudolf's death in 1613, many of these prized objects, exotic and paintings, were dispersed in different fashions, and far too complicated to get into this here. But we know that also many things were stolen from Prague Castle by the Swedes during the 30 Years' War. And to conclude, I'd like to show you the cover of my forthcoming edited volume on Hans Kievenhüller, which is hopefully coming out by the end of this year or beginning of next year, which has many exciting chapters by 6 authors I have invited to contribute on this fascinating man and his correspondence. Thank you very much. How do we get out of here?
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. It was great, as usual.
Thank you so much. You give me too much credit, I think. But it's a great amazing story, isn't it? It would make a great Netflix
always.
movie.
The marvel of Lisbon. It's amazing. It was like a rock star. Yeah, thank you so much. So I think we can start the time for discussions. Well, I have already one question, if I may, because I am so curious, as I heard the other story that you have talked about also. I don't know if, I think it was an elephant that was offered by Queen Catherine to her cousins in Austria. And then
2 elephants.
Okay, and then it was so cold that the elephants died because nobody knew how to take care of them. So now I would also like to know how did they care about this? So were they well treated? Why did they die? Do you know anything about this?
I think Abada was given, these animals couldn't live without their mahouts because, of course,
nobody
knew. I mean, a master of the stable is not going to know. He will know how to take care of a horse, of course, yeah, but certainly not a pachyderm. And I think the mahouts, for the rhinoceros, Abada, she was given more or less the same type of meal as the elephants, lots of rice, but she was supposedly also ate fruits and vegetables and hay like horses. So I see that there's some raised hands.
Yes, please, Samuel.
I see Abada has piqued everyone's curiosity.
Samuel, please, can you?
Samuel, he's getting his.
Yeah, getting something.
You have to put on your he's getting his.
Unmute. You have to unmute, Samuel. Unmute. We are not listening to you.
Yeah, he unmuted himself. I think it's a problem of permissions. Oh, there we go.
Okay, sorry. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. This is wonderful. We all love these rhinocerons. And
yeah,
we all do. It's great.
But my question is precisely about this. You know, you showed how this was an event, a kind of public event, and the animal. I mean, this Abada in particular was kept in a space that was accessible to the people. At the same time, the Kievenhüller and the people who were owning these animals were, of course, the kings, or they were the persons who would be able or willing to have these animals. So is it possible to make some distinction in the way different groups had access, more or less access to the animals, and perhaps had a privileged access to them if they were part of the higher circle? I mean, my question is kind of also larger. I mean, now we have zoos that are kind of public bourgeois institutions, etc. But it somehow came. This is a genealogy, but at the beginning, after all, this was it looked more like something quite exclusive. But so I see a tension there. On the one hand, you show instances that this is really a kind of popular event. Everybody enjoyed that this was happening, and then the animal came to Madrid, etc. But is it possible to make observe some distinctions?
Yes. Samuel. And thank you. It's a very good question, because whether we're talking about Rudolph II or Philip II, they had in large collections in Kunstkammers, which were really quite selective. Who could go in and who could go out, who could go see their objects. When Bada arrived in Lisbon, she actually, like the elephants, she was paraded around town. The elephants were too paraded from the Estaros to take baths in the Tagus River, and they walked along the Rua Nova dos Mercadores. So Lisbon residents were used to seeing these foreign animals, or exotic animals, which is what surprised Italian visitors and ambassadors by this, it's almost commonplace. I don't want to say it is, but it was commonplace. And putting her right in the middle of the heart of Lisbon, Abada, in this pen, I mean, she became like the star. And I was surprised to find how this ambassador, I was looking at his papers for something else, and suddenly in the middle of these papers, he is visiting Abada and giving the Mahout a tip. So it shows to me that she was an attraction on different levels. I think when she moves to Spain, she becomes more exclusive when she moves into that special stable area of the Casa del Campo. And to visit these royal palaces, they weren't open to the public like a royal public garden today. You had to have permission from Agustin Profit. Was a custodian. He was like a concierge and a keeper of the palace. He took care of the gardens. He took care of the animals. The Casa del Campo, as Ana knows, had other animals there, swans and fish, and these animals were raised for eating. And so that was the best place to put Abada. So I think, I don't have it right from the word of these travel logs. They don't say that, but I think you had to ask permission and you had to pay the concierge a tip if the king wasn't around. So this was, there are two levels, and thank you. It was a very good question. There are two levels. And in Lisbon, we were lucky. And the citizens of Lisbon were lucky. They were, these animals stepped right off the boat and there they were. So yes, and because Sebastian died in Africa shortly afterwards, Abada just stayed on in Lisbon until the new king came. So
thank you so much, Anne-Marie. I would then add something, but I'm going to give the floor first to Shima, please.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear?
Yes.
Anne-Marie, this was so fun. And I wish I would have heard a talk like this when I was a kid, because all I was hearing of history was history of politicians. And now to hear a history of something actually interesting like a rhino, it's really a delight.
Yes, it's fun history. This is what it's all about.
So when you were talking particularly about, this is not so much a question, it's more a comment, and hopefully I can share something you would enjoy as a favor to return. When you were talking about this production of mementos and extraction of mementos from this rhino, I was reminded of a paper that I've tried to make other people read before. It's a curious one, and if you haven't read, I think you would love it. It's called Ruminations on Edible Icons by Gary Vichan. From when he was working
Gary Vichan, but I've never read this.
Oh, the paper is delightful. It's about pilgrimage souvenirs. And the idea of creating a souvenir with some kind of physical propinquity to something holy. And all as you were talking about these mementos, I was just reminded so much of that genre of object. And maybe you could also find some interesting parallels, or at least have a fun paper to read. So,
yes, thank you so much. And it is amazing how much memorabilia of Abada exists. And in different locations, Innsbruck, Vienna, a diary. So thank you so much. And I once took a graduate course with Gary Vichan many years ago when I was your age in Washington, D.C.
Oh, lucky you.
I know, but thank you for reminding me. This is great that I should.
And thank you for telling me how his name is pronounced. I'm a bit embarrassed. I was guessing. Thank you so much again. Very beautiful.
You're so welcome.
Today.
Thank you, Shima. So I just want also to ask you something. Maybe you know this story much better than I, that in the time of King Dom Manuel, he was so in love with everything with exotic animals that he even arranged a fight between an elephant and a rhino at Terreiro do Paço, like in the Roman manner. And then it was the elephant that just ran away. Can you imagine an elephant running away?
She went back to the Estaros Palace. She ran from the Ribeiro Palace all the way back to Rocio. Well, I would too if I had to confront a rhinoceros. I would be scared shitless.
No.
So,
in a city,
I mean, really,
and two animals of that size running. Well, it's
crazy
amazing.
stories. I think we should get money and make a Netflix movie about these animals.
Absolutely.
Including dragon trees.
Yes, including about 16th century in Portugal. It's enough to make a Netflix series. Absolutely. Awesome success.
So we need to get Henrique and get some grant money and find a good director and a good cameraman.
Yeah,
we have to meet in Dublin and discuss about this, discuss everything about Dublin.
No, we have to go to all youth and sell this story. That's what we should do.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.